At the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Azula is broken. She becomes paranoid, more controlling and domineering than ever before, and she begins to hallucinate. She sees her long-lost mother and hears the echoes of her own insecurities abound around her. That desire for perfection and approval that we see right from her earliest episodes.
One hair out of place
almost isn't good enough.
It all comes to a head with this ultimately sad duel in the finale with Zuko, the last Agni Kai. She is brought low, but her story doesn't end there. Spoilers for Smoke and Shadow and The Search. We know from the show that Zuko and Azula's mother, Ursa, vanished under mysterious circumstances.
Where is my mother?
But even though Zuko interrogates his father for weeks, he soon realizes that Ozai is not going to break. Defeated he may be, but his will is not broken. Zuko realizes that the only person that could get that information out of Ozai is Azula, the one child that he was genuinely close to and arguably loved and cared for. And interestingly enough, it turns out that Azula actually wants to find her mother as well, and agrees to help. And it's here that we begin to see one of the roots of her mental state come to the forefront of the story, her relationship with her mother. She grew up feeling that her mother hated her for simply being talented, preferring Zuko, whom she outperformed at every level. Zuko then allows Azula and Ozai to sit together. He even brings them tea, and we know from this scene that Zuko is feeling conflicted. She's both this girl who tried to kill him numerous times, and his younger sister. Zuko allows Azula and Ozai to have a few minutes alone, and it seems that Azula still needs that validation from her father. Even so, she eventually gets the information that they need and persuades Zuko to let her come with them to find Ursa. And we see that across these years of imprisonment, Azula has developed this idea that Ursa has been behind everything that's happened to her, behind her downfall, behind her father's downfall. Why didn't you ask her? Which of you did she approach first? You've been conspiring to take me down since the day I was born because I had something you didn't. Power. So Azula has really stepped deep into that mindset that we see her fall into at the end of the series. Her father gave her everything, and it was Zuko that took it from her. But who was it that coached and taught and loved Zuko? It was Ursa, her mother. But it's important to remember how young Azula actually is. At the time of the search, she's 15 or 16, but during the show, she's only 14. One of those crucial developmental stages where she was deprived of a real maternal or even paternal figure in her life, given how Ozai was. And we see this mentality of hers get worse and worse throughout the story, with those lines that we see in the show returning.
No, I love you, Azula. I do.
I love you, Azula. I do. They keep haunting her because she has been taught only to relate to people through fear and strength, and that to relate to people through love is weakness. But there is still a part of her that loves Zuko. So there's this strange moment in the series, in season 3, I think episode 2, where Azula actually expresses what sounds like genuine concern for Zuko, even if in her own shallow way.
So, I hear you've been to visit your Uncle Fatso in the prison tower.
What is it that you want, Azula?
Believe it or not, I'm looking out for you. If people find out you've been to see Uncle, they'll think you're plotting with him. Just be careful, dum-dum.
This scene can be interpreted in a number of different ways, but I like to interpret it as a twisted form of caring, and we see this kind of underlying care come up in the search as well, when Azula actually saves not just Zuko, but all of them from a horde of spirit moths. And there doesn't seem to be an ulterior motive. She doesn't even flee at that point. There's then this nice exchange between Zuko and Sokka, who explains that even though they fight, Katara is still his sister. Zuko then puts a blanket over Azula while she sleeps, shivering and fearing her mother. Now, across the story, Azula is trying to remove Zuko from the throne. She sees the throne as her destiny, but she's repeatedly tormented by dreams and visions saying that it isn't her destiny, that she has to find something else, that she can't be Fire Lord. She, of course, refuses to accept this. Eventually, they track down their mother to a small village in the Fire Nation. There's a whole lot of spirit shenanigans before that, but Azula violently confronts her mother for conspiring against her. She calls herself a monster in front of her and begs her to admit that after all these years she's been trying to take her down, that she feared Azula above all. But then there's this silence and this moment as Azula's mum tries to decide what to say. And she says, "I'm sorry I didn't love you enough." And that answer catches her off guard, and she begins to cry, confronted with the reality that her mother did love her. But more importantly, that how Azula turned out wasn't all her own fault. I want to go into this a little bit more one day with a whole video looking at Azula's psychology, but I think that a large part of her mental state is to do with blame and credit. Because you see, she was a prodigy, which means that she got credit for everything that she did. She was constantly praised. Every single success she had was her own. But the flip side of that, I think, is because she knew she was so good at everything she did, anything that went wrong was also her fault. She expected her mother to say, "Yes, you're a monster and it's all your fault," but instead, we have this moment where she says, "No, I should have loved you more." So young kids who grow up in abusive or controlling or emotionally manipulative households, especially with divorced parents, often blame themselves for any neglect that they suffer from, that they weren't good enough to be loved, that they didn't deserve it, in a sense. And Ursa did love Azula. We see numerous shots throughout the comic, and hints of that in the show, that she did care for Azula, of course. But this idea that Azula doesn't have to blame herself for how she turned out, I think is important. It's at this point that Azula begins to wonder if being Fire Lord is really her destiny. She feels lost and without purpose. She repeatedly tries to take Zuko out in these psychopathic moments, but she fails each time. She's left with the question, who is she? Who is she meant to be if not the Fire Lord? Unable to face this reality, to face her mother in the flesh, this woman that she had made out to be the shadow mind behind everything, pulling the strings behind her downfall and Ozai's downfall, she flees into the dark. Her final words, "Even when you're strong, Zuzu, you're weak." And that brings us to the end of Azula and kind of Zuko's story in the search. Because Zuko isn't just trying to piece together this world and his nation after the 100-Year War. He's trying to piece together this family unit that has been fractured by an abusive and manipulative figure, his father. In the aftermath, he spends weeks searching for Azula, but to no avail. She remains in hiding until the new Ozai Society uprising in the year 102 AG, an underground revolutionary group established in hopes of restoring Ozai to the Fire Nation throne. We learn that their leader, Ukano, is visited by the Kimirikage, ancient spirits of vengeance who seek justice and strength for the Fire Nation. They used to hunt warlords and men who had failed to protect the weak and the vulnerable. They explain safety is born of strength, and as long as that weakling is on the throne, neither your nation nor your family are safe. See, what they need is to have you on the throne, don't they, Mishi? Everything will be safe and protected and happy because cats are amazing and magical. All hail Fire Lord Mishka. So the Kimirikage are clearly planning something, and throughout the story they kidnap more and more children, taking them into the unknown, and the Fire Nation capital gets more and more restless and agitated, with more regular riots and protests as people feel unsafe, afraid, and they begin longing for the strength and protection that Ozai may have brought them as Fire Lord. Aang, Zuko and the whole gang head into the Dragon Catacombs to try and find some hint of how they could deal with the Kimirikage, and what do they find but the Kimirikage themselves? Except, the Kimirikage tell them that we have never set foot in the human world since they first haunted those warlords centuries ago. This leads the team to the realization that the Kimirikage are actually humans masquerading as spirits. With this in mind, a fight on the Fire Nation rooftops ensue, and the team manages to pin them down, surrounded, until guess who? Azula. She reveals herself with a signature lightning bolt, conjured with nothing but a flick of her wrist. Zuko in reflex redirects the lightning, only to have Azula redirect it back at him. Not only has she returned to full strength, but she has mastered abilities that Zuko never thought she would be able to. Taken by surprise, Zuko struck in the chest by a lightning bolt, she flees into the dark. When we last saw Azula in the search, she was questioning who she was, what her destiny was if not the throne. And it's here that we begin to see a new facet of her mentality come to light. When Azula confronts Ukano, the leader of that new Ozai society, she demands a massive, violent riot in the city. Ukano protests that I don't see how this will put Ozai back on the throne. Curiously, she responds, Ozai was never part of the plan. It seems that for all she depended mentally on his approval and his validation as her father, that control that he had over her is beginning to fade. She loved and worshipped him, even after he essentially dismissed her in the finale. Tensions rise in the city as people become more restless, and soon they're rioting in the streets. In response, Zuko begins to enforce a curfew on the populace. He arrests his right-hand law enforcer, promotes another, and orders the immediate arrest of those protesting in the streets. The curfew only reinforces the tensions, and Zuko feels forced to use more oppressive tactics to keep his city and his nation under control. That's important, and we'll come back to that. And we do actually learn why Azula took on the form of the Kamurikage, these spirits of vengeance from ages past, because when she's facing down against Mai, who she believes as her ultimate betrayer, not only was she her first traitor, but she didn't just side against her, but she sided actively with Zuko, who she not only sees as her inferior, but her foil. She explains, you remember that one time that you, me, and Ty Lee had a sleepover at your house? The one where we took Moki, I don't know, from her mum? All I know is you were horribly annoying that night, tossing and turning, whispering Kamurikage. When Mai was young, she was terrified of these spirits, the Kamurikage, and Azula confesses that she took their image from Mai's fears, her nightmares. So, that's just pretty cruel. Zuko then intervenes, and we get a clash of flames much like that of the last Agni Kai, red on blue. Tracking her down into the catacombs, Zuko confronts his sister and admits, maybe this is a weird thing to say, but given the circumstances, you seem better. Then there's this moment in the ensuing fight where, I'm not even kidding, their flames, red and blue, clash like lightsabers, with the added pfst sound effect. But why does Azula seem better to Zuko? Well, Azula points out that she considered what her destiny might be in this new world, and has embraced that she will never be Fire Lord. She espouses that, once I discovered my own destiny, that voice in my head finally shut up. You see, my destiny is to turn you into the Fire Lord I tried to be. One who's strong and rules through fear. Zuko dismisses this at first as one of her deranged rants, but then she points out, in the past 24 hours, I've shown you just how ruthless you can be. Deep down inside, you're still one of us. After all, he enforced curfews, he fired his closest advisors, he arrested people, and he threatened to shut down the whole city. In this moment, Azula becomes a kind of new foil for Zuko, not just competing with him, but fostering a side of him that he has fought for years. A large part of Zuko's story in the comics is his heritage. Is he going to be a bad leader like his father because it's in his blood, or can he be something more? He thought he proved this once and for all in the Day of Black Sun, when he faced down against his father. But here, Azula causes him to question that in himself again. The new Ozai society is found and disbanded. Azula has no leverage anymore. In the aftermath, Zuko speaks with his people. Azula watches from the rooftops. He lays out what happened, where he went wrong, and what he would do going forward in the future. She mocks him, calling it touching, and melts into the background, away to pursue this newfound destiny of hers in some new way in the future. But how did Azula disappear so easily? Well, she might have been using ExpressVPN, which allows you to pretend you're anywhere in the world at any time. It's great, it's fantastic for all the reasons aforementioned. Click this link or the link down in the description below. Help support the channel and my beautiful kitty Mishka. Seriously, I've actually found this really useful. It's really cool to have, and it's really easy to use. So, go check it out. But that is Azula's story so far. We're probably going to get more in the future because we don't know what happened to her after that. Or at least I really hope that we get more after that. We don't get much of a hint in Legend of Korra what happened to her. There's a couple of clues, but not much. In the meantime, come follow me over on all my social media. Come support me on Patreon if that's what you like to do. Have a Discord community. It's really cool. Twitter, Facebook, email me stuff that you made, the address and links in the description below. Stay nerdy, and I'll see you in the future.